So David Cameron starting that visit to America in just a couple of hours' time. But just how special is the relationship between the UK and the US? Joined by foreign policy analyst Dr. James Boyce. Hi, thanks for joining us. Is it special still?
Well, not only is it special, it's essential and unique, according to the two leaders in their piece that they wrote for the Washington Post. Yeah, I believe so. It was a mutually written piece. I think what's interesting about it is that you saw last week when the Israeli delegation came to Washington, there was a real sense that America had to bend to the will of the Israelis. You don't see that sense today. You see a meeting of two individuals who I think get on well and who recognise that the United States and the United Kingdom have a shared history and heritage and shared aspirations in the world. There's not a sort of what can you do for me mentality. It's a real relationship in which I think the president benefits from being able to phone up David Cameron at the middle of the night if necessary and speak to him in English and get a real sense for what it is that's going on in the world and how Britain can help.
Middle East wouldn't necessarily agree. They would see it as big Satan and little Satan.
Well, I'm not here to talk about it, absolutely. I think that one of the challenges is that they've got similar outlooks, and we're going to be working with them. We've been in Iraq, we're in Afghanistan, we're looking at pulling out from Afghanistan on similar timelines, and I think that's what the main focus of today will be about.
Yeah, but the argument is that, you know, when America says jump, we say how high, or that's certainly the perception. I mean, when do we ever say no to them?
Well, Vietnam, for a start.
It's a long
time ago, but I think what's important to recognise is that British Prime Ministers have in the past been able to say no to an American president, just because in recent years with Tony Blair, for example, we were in a slightly different situation. I think David Cameron is trying to redress that balance. I think he's someone who can go along and talk to Barack Obama and put Britain's case quite forcefully. I think what he's trying very much to do is to redress the imbalance, I think, that perhaps Tony Blair brought. We do need to recognise the historic circumstances through which Blair and Bush governed, I think, and not lose sight of that.
Is there what's happened for President Obama to be warmer to the British Prime Minister than what we saw when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister? And frankly, he was rude to him.
Well, I think it's important to recognise that it's about perception. When Gordon Brown came into Downing Street, he looked at George Bush and realised he didn't want to get too close to Bush, because he wasn't going to be around for very much longer. When Obama came in, he saw Gordon Brown and realised he probably wasn't going to be around for very much longer. In the case of Cameron and Obama, you've got two leaders who are going to be on the world stage for 5 years, who perhaps have managed to gel better, for example. This nonsense about was Obama rebuffing Britain by returning a bust of Churchill was ridiculous, because it had been lent specifically to George Bush as an admirer of
Yeah, but he did
Churchill.
meet him in a kitchen, the hotel kitchen, didn't he? And that was the only time he could speak to him. He gave him a box set of DVDs that didn't even play on the British system. And whereas David Cameron is in the posh seats on Air Force One, he's got a gin and tonic in his hand, then he's going to go and watch the basketball with him afterwards.
Well, it's important to recognise that that wasn't the only meeting that Barack Obama had with Gordon Brown. And that was very much Brown chasing Obama to try and get a meeting to put himself one step ahead of the rest of the G8 at that point. You could make an argument that David Cameron is being used by Barack Obama. He's being taken to Ohio, a massively important swing state in the upcoming presidential election. He's not taking him to his home state. He's not going to Hawaii, for example. He could watch the game on television. He's going on Air Force One to Ohio. It's very much...
Because the Rust Belt is very important, of course, isn't it, as far as the election is concerned in November. What if President Obama loses? Has Mr. Cameron then aligned himself too closely with the Democrats, when actually one would assume that he should perhaps favour the Republicans?
Well,
politically,
that's certainly a recognisable position. I think that what you're seeing, however, is Downing Street saying, we are the head of government, we go to Washington to meet the fellow head of government. And as a result of that, there isn't going to be a meeting with Republican leadership, as I understand it, on this trip. Perhaps you could make an argument he could have met with leaders of Congress, and that might have sort of balanced this out a little bit. But I think this is the equivalent. It's not a full state visit, because that would be by Her Majesty the Queen, but this is as close to that as you can get on the political side of things. This is very much an attempt to go over there, to have a working meeting to discuss Syria, Iran, Afghanistan, for example, and then to have a symbolic state dinner, go over to Ohio and have a real good rapport between the President and the Prime Minister.
Why now?
I think it has a lot to do with timings. I think this is when the President and the Prime Minister have got opportunities and availability. It's also a reciprocal trip coming on the back of the state visit that Obama gave here to this country last summer. It's also ahead of the presidential election and before Obama gets too much into the fall campaign.
OK, Josh, we must leave it there. Thank you very much indeed
Thanks,
for joining
Kay.
us.
Cheers.
Appreciate it. Thank you.